Hello, everyone. Welcome into the USWNT hour. We are in the midst of two international friendlies, and the U.S. women's national team is getting its first test as a roster of 23 before they head off to Mexico for the CONCACAF W Championship World Cup qualifiers. The USA defeated Colombia 3-0, but it took 54 minutes for the U.S. to get on the board. We're going to discuss what Colombia did so well defensively, where the U.S. were struggling, how they improved throughout that match, and what we want to see from the U.S. as they face Colombia for the second time in their second friendly on Tuesday. All of this and so much more in today's USWNT hour. Like this video and subscribe to the Attacking Third YouTube page right now to join the conversation in the chat because we want to hear from you. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the USWNT Hour show. As always, I'm your host, Lisa Roman, joined by Lori Lindsey, former U.S. international. And today we have a handful of special guests with us. Lead women's soccer writer for CBS Sports.com, Sandra Herrera, and former U.S. international Danielle Slaton joins us. You can watch us live on youtube.com/attackingthird every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And you can join the conversation in our YouTube chat. You can also listen to all of the USWNT Hour shows on the Attacking Third podcast. Download, follow, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and all the places that you get your podcasts. I saw some waves happening. Lori, Danielle, Sandra. Hi, guys. How's it going? Danielle, welcome in. First time on the show. How are you?
Thanks. I'm pumped to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Oh, yeah, we are pumped. Lori, how's it going? It's always good to chat with you.
Yeah, good to see everybody. I mean, I'm feeling very fortunate to be in community with all of you. So it's really great to have Dee. Always the best. Good to see you, friend. And Sandra, you know how I feel about you, so hopefully you do. Yes. At least.
Yeah, I mean, I see you guys all the time. It's great. Sandra, love having you on when we get you on the USWNT hours. Yep. Fantastic stuff. We have a lot to dive into today. I want to get into it. Before I do, I have a reminder for everyone. If you joined the chat before, you know how it goes. I have a $100 Paramount Plus gift card to give away. All you've got to do is like this video, drop your social media handle in the chat without the @ symbol, and you'll be entered to win a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. This means you can watch all of the U.S. games on Paramount Plus, CONCACAF W Championships, NWSL matches. There's so much content that you need to watch it. So like this video, drop your handle in the chat. Let's get into it, ladies, because we have a very big match, U.S. versus Colombia. They end up winning 3-0, but as we talk about this and we look at this game, I want to look at the starting lineups, our predictions for it. And Lori, I'm going to jump to you first because we had a preview for this match and we kind of talked about our expectations for this squad, what we were expecting against Colombia. What were your initial reactions after the end of that match?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me about the lineup. At the end of the match, I felt like this is a team that hadn't played together in a couple months, and a lot of the players have come off like a big stretch of NWSL games and had practice, I think it was twice, with one another. So working through some different situations on the field that were presented by a really tough Colombia team whose goalkeeper should get a major shout out. She was awesome. And I think these are the issues, or not issues, but these are the complexities of the game that we expect to see, I think, throughout qualifying. And it was a good test for the U.S. to see a little bit of two different halves and what could be presented throughout qualifying to them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge game, and you talk about that goalkeeping from Perez. Fantastic. Danielle, you were there. You were an analyst watching this game from the studio. Starting lineups, your reactions to this game. Tell us a little bit of what you thought when you saw this.
I would say my initial reactions when I saw the starting 11 was it was an interesting mix of veteran and youth. I think that's important as the U.S. heads towards qualifying and as they still, I would say, quite frankly, continue to transition. I think there is certainly an eye towards the youth. Vlatko has brought in younger players, is willing to take some risks on them and get some minutes, but also has a core handful of veteran players who are not only in camp, but are getting a starting role. I mean, you think of Becky Sauerbrunn, Kelly O'Hara specifically, really sitting in there to anchor and lead the back line alongside Alana Cook and Emily Fox ahead of Casey Murphy. So I think you have those two veteran players really in there to provide that anchor and that stability. And then you have like the next level, I would say, or the next wave of veterans and Rose Lavelle and Lindsey Herrera, who really this could potentially be their team. They will be the key leaders on the pitch potentially come 2023. So getting them some minutes. But you got to think that the big story on the night was Ashley Hatch getting the starting nod, particularly because Alex Morgan has been in camp and been playing so well, scoring, I don't know, dozens and dozens of NWSL goals. So I think this was a big opportunity for her. And that was probably the most noteworthy surprise, I guess I would say, of the starting 11.
Yeah, I think that people were also looking for maybe a quicker start, and it just didn't happen in this game. I mean, it took nearly an hour for the team to find their breakthrough against Colombia. And I know in our preview of this game, we chatted a lot and tried to highlight a little bit about that middle third of the pitch and sort of curious if things were going to be clogged up there a little bit or some things were going to cancel each other out. So I think maybe going into the next game, I would maybe like to see some adjustments to sort of utilize the wide spaces a little bit more. I'm curious if maybe we're going to see the type of, I know there will be rotation, so I'm curious to see the type of rotation that we're going to see maybe on the wings and at those kind of fullback positions. And I think we need to see a little bit more of Kristie Mewis in the six.
Yes.
This was a little bit of a new pleasant surprise, I guess we'll label it, that we all got to see in this game. So we'll see.
Yeah, this was huge, Sandra. Kristie Mewis rotated into this game around the 70th minute, 72nd minute, and Mewis subs in for Andy Sullivan. That's also when we saw Taylor Korniak get her first cap with the United States women's national team. Let's talk about it. We've got to talk about this midfield trio. It was Rose Lavelle, Lindsey Herrera, and Andy Sullivan to start. No surprises there, at least from our end. But then when you see Kristie Mewis being rotated in, Danielle, what were your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think the reality is probably that's the least deep position that the United States has, right? So I still think there's some experimentation going on, right? Like, I mean, I forget exactly when it was where Lindsey Herrera was playing back there. I mean, when Julie Ertz went down, who, by the way, was like in that position, and there was no depth because she was such a rock solid force in there, that I think that was a big learning lesson for Vlatko over the course of the last couple of years of, oh my goodness, what happens if someone goes down in that position? And they're still, I think, continuing to experiment there. I'm not sure it's her best position. I think that it's good to see her there, but I want to see her there a little bit more. And I do think it's important for Vlatko to continue to figure out what that depth is going to look like in that role, because Julie Ertz may or may not be back and in top form a year from now. And if, God forbid, something happens to Andy Sullivan, what's the next situation? Is it Kristie Mewis? Is it, gosh, I don't know, Lindsey Herrera back there? I'm not sure. I mean, is it Taylor Korniak back there? Like, who the heck knows could fit into that role? So I still have a lot of questions. Great for Kristie Mewis to get some minutes, but I don't feel like this Colombia side at that point in the game when she came into the match answered a lot of things for me. It was good for her to get some experience, but I'm not sure that that I'm convinced that that's the new role for her and the best place for her.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Dia. I think just the way the game was going, I do think we saw some of the things. I love this conversation because it's one that we've talked a lot about on here before. And just in terms of like, if you don't have a ton of depth as a true six that you're bringing in, then how do you manipulate other players around within the way that you're playing the game, right? We've talked about actually Kristie Mewis and Taylor Korniak being an 8 position, right? At times will they drop deeper? At times, depending on the opponent, will they push forward higher? And we've actually seen Kristie Mewis do that more so, I would say, with Houston in the past years, and we've seen her do that with Gotham. And she could play make, and we saw that in this game. But defensively, and the way that she screens the back line. A lot of those questions, to your point, Dee, I don't think were answered against this Colombia team, but it'll be interesting going forward. I'll just be curious to see, gets to to what opponent then do things shift? And if Andy Sullivan is in there, by the way, who I actually thought had a really good game in terms of her positioning, we didn't see her on the ball as much in terms of possession, but I think in terms of her getting herself into positions, regaining the ball when it's turned over, I think she does that one of the best in the NWSL. We see how important she is with Washington Spirit, and I thought she was good the other night before she came out as well. So it'll be interesting. I agree with you.
Yeah, Andy Sullivan was one of my players heading into this match that I wanted to have a huge game. I wanted her to solidify her role there, defensively be on lock. And I agree. I think she did that in the moments that she was given, being able to switch the point of attack and draw defenders in and then open up the space for Haran and Lavelle ahead of her. We also talked about other players that we wanted to see have a big game. Sandra, for you, it was some of the center back actions. You wanted to see these center backs getting assists, but defensively, Sandra, when you looked at this match, obviously not so much pressure on the U.S., but what did you take of their back starting four? We saw Kelly O'Hara get extended minutes, which we haven't seen at the club level. So what did you think of that back four?
You know what, I was fine with it in terms of seeing them get a run out. I know when we did the preview, I mentioned that players like Kelly O'Hara and Becky Sauerbrunn were players that kind of started off the regular season, kind of building on their minutes, kind of dealing with some lower body injuries there, and kind of stacking them up as they went. So now these next pair of friendlies were going to be the little bit of the final prep that they would get to sort of get re-familiar with get reintegrated with this national team, but not just reintegrated with the national team, but newer faces that are on that back line. So I was very happy to see this sort of center back pairing of Sauerbrunn alongside Alana Cook, who has really sort of emerged very rapidly as this sort of newer, more consistent face in the center back position for the United States women's national team. We talked a lot about how things like whether it's been pregnancy or unfortunate injuries that have come up during 2022 that have kind of shaped this roster. And Alana Cook, I think defensively more than anybody, has been a little bit more of that consistent presence for this team. So I was really eager to see how that pairing would look between a Sauerbrunn and Alana Cook, because I think they're two players who can kind of function a little bit similarly, both very patient, both with great vision of the pitch, can read a play 1-2 plays ahead, and really kind of rely on things positionally more than actual speed to get behind a ball or try to recover and run things down. But I liked the pairing between the two of them. I thought that they switched off pretty well from time to time, and I think in terms of making the adjustments into that second half, on the fullback, we saw Huerta come in, for O'Hara. I really liked that switch as well. I think it was something that they targeted automatically and saw, okay, there's things that are not working here in terms of the timing. They were missing the final pass a little bit there. It sort of felt like at times during that first half, and sort of seeing things that kind of pinched up a little bit in that middle third. I think knowing that they had to continue to rely on a Fox or on a Huerta to try to help spread things out and open things up a little bit, I thought was really good as well. So I'm hopeful that going into this next game against Colombia, we sort of see a little bit more things ironed out there. Maybe we get a little bit more extended minutes for Huerta, or perhaps we even see somebody like a Naomi Girma get some minutes in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think before we even look ahead to that match, it's so important to take what we can and learn from this initial one, right? I mean, the first half scoreless. Opportunities were there for the U.S. I want to talk about this front line, where the spaces were, where the United States wasn't occupying, kind of what we saw from Colombia defensively and how they were able to play well. Lori, when you looked at the front line of Smith, Pugh, and Hatch being in there, not Alex Morgan, that change, where did they struggle in the first 45 minutes to find the back of the net, frankly, as basic as I can make that question in a sense, but like especially with that front three and where the spaces were?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think just execution really in the tempo. We saw that, just getting on the same page, making sure that you're playing at a quick enough tempo, because, the reality is with Colombia, yes, they did play with the sweeper, but as Danielle even talked about it in studio at halftime too, that sweeper was pushing up. It was more of like a flat back 5. I thought they did a really good job of, once the ball did get deep into the final third, then they converged centrally, right? So there's a ton of numbers in the box, making it difficult for to bypass at least the first line of defense when you're trying to cut the ball back. However, I do still think, I think sometimes we think when somebody plays a back 5, we think of them playing as this low block. And I don't actually think that was the case. I think they stepped well. I thought they tried to push out. So it was some space in behind. I mean, you even go back and watch the game. There's times when Lindsey Herrera's making a run late in the first half from deep in the midfield, getting on a header. That was an opportunity on goal. So I think the thing is with Macario, her movement is so sophisticated, right? She can drop back and she can play a 10 as well, but she can also threaten in behind. And it's just going to take time with Ashley Hatch, because this game is very different than the NWSL. So just understanding where the movements are. But I think one thing that in particular for Ashley Hatch is just continuing to threaten in behind, because even if you're not going to get that ball, then it opens up space underneath for a player like Haran, Rose Lavelle, and that's where it was most tight. And because somebody's checking back, Ashley Hatch wanted to check back, then you just condense that area even more. So I think those are the little things. I mean, I think, obviously Sophia Smith scoring the 2 goals. Mal Pugh could have been on early if she would have taken it with her left foot. Still a ton of opportunities, right? I mean, in the first half, that could have been 2-0 and the game looks very different. So there's still threatening in behind, on goal and options. I just think right now it's just going to take some time getting used to who's ever playing up there, or particularly that number 9, and just understanding the movements that are going to be most impactful to open up space depending on what the opposition is giving you.
I love all of those takes. We have to talk about it, though. 2 penalty kicks given to the United States throughout this game. Danielle, both of them were saved. Huge shout out to Catalina Perez, the goalkeeper for Colombia. Incredible job by her. But on those 2 penalty kicks, what did you see on the fouls and on the kicks? Was it the kicker's mistake? Was it great goaltending? What are your thoughts on those 2 PKs?
So I think they were fine calls. I'm okay with the calls. I was actually sitting next to Melissa Ortiz, and she was like, "No way!" It's like, you so wrong.
It was.
So I'm okay with the decisions by the referee. What was funny though? I'm thinking back to calling the Women's World Cup and VAR. Credit goes to Catalina. Like I absolutely want to give her credit, but she was off her line, and that would have been a yellow card. And a redo, it would have been on both of the penalty kicks, right? I mean, she's not off by much, but like with how tight, I was remembering how tight they were calling that at the World Cup. I was like, that's yellow. Like, and if she did it again,
she was off on both of them. She was off on both. Yeah,
I mean, just by a hair, like a foot. I mean, not a ton, but with VAR and that, like, so I'll be interested to see how that continues to evolve. I think the World Cup was kind of a nightmare scenario, and that they were using VAR for the first time and everyone was learning and they were calling it far too tightly. But I did notice that. Credit goes to her though. I mean, I thought the penalty kick that Rose Lavelle took was a savable height, if you will. It was off the ground. So, it looks sexy and awesome. And she read it well both times. But, I think the United States doesn't converts on their PKs. They do, and I thought it was just interesting to see when you don't have a Megan Rapinoe in the game in particular, like who is that next person? How are they thinking about who's number 2, number 3, number 4 in the lineup? So that was just kind of those thoughts popped into my head, I think, in all of those scenarios.
So it's 2 former players on the national team, Lori and Danielle. We got this question on Twitter, actually. How do they decide? Is it the player's choice on the pitch? Is it chosen beforehand? Who decides who takes these penalty kicks?
What was it for you, Lori?
Yeah, typically it was like, listen, you're taking these when you're leading up to qualifiers or some big tournament, you're taking these quite often, right? And for typically you'd have 2 players that were, hey, these are going to be the players who are going to take it in the run of play if something happens. And it ultimately was just up to the player's decision who wanted it, who felt the most confident, and they would step up and take it.
Yeah.
The same deal.
It was, I mean, I think for us, when I think back to at least senior level national team, it was always a discussion or it wasn't discussion. It was always announced in the pregame talk, right? Like, and it was, maybe 1, 2, 3, knowing like, okay, good. If the first person for some reason didn't want it or wasn't in the game, then it would go to the second person, go to the third person. So to me, it was a coach's decision, but the conversation and the training and all of that happened. So it wasn't like it was, oh, Sandra, you get a PK today.
No, you.
Okay, like it wasn't like that. It was prepared for, it was trained for it, the conversation was had, but ultimately I think it was a coach's decision.
And it comes from a bit of player confidence as well in the moment, who's like, yeah, I want this one, right? Like there, you have that adrenaline and you have the confidence and the momentum of a game as a player as you're heading into those types of situations. But the game changed in the second half. It opened up a lot for the U.S. We've got to talk about the two substitutes that came on. Alex Morgan subbed on for Ashley Hatch in the center striker position, and Ashley Sanchez in for Lindsey Herrera. Ashley Sanchez, holy cow, what a game from her. Sandra, I know we talked about this a little, you and me, but when Sanchez stepped on the pitch, things opened for her and she was dancing on the ball. Is that what you expected to see when Sanchez steps on like that?
Yeah, 100%. I think having her available off the bench was huge in a match like this, where the team sort of struggled a little bit to find that finishing pass or that extra pass in the final third. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, quite frankly, this was first game back for a lot of these players in combination with some newer faces in the mix. It was going to take them a little bit of time, and we're not going to show any disrespect to Colombia. I mean, they were going to come out there and put together a good game plan against the United States. And I think we sort of saw that play out in the first half. So to sort of see the adjustments made, I think you see something like a Morgan coming on for Hatch, and that's a little bit of a like for like in terms of things positionally. But having Herrera come on for Sanchez, I think fit a number of things. I mean, for one, we're seeing Lindsey Herrera go out there and still playing with a really taped up knee. That I think there's a lot of question marks there around Herrera right now, and I think that she's a player that you want to have at your disposal going through this qualifier. She's a really, really important player to this team right now, especially in light of missing, some other players, who are out, whether it's an Ertz or a Macario, et cetera. And I think it comes down to who do you want to see higher in that midfield. Mm-hmm. You do want to see somebody like a Herrera a little bit higher instead of relegated to a lower role. And then seeing someone like a Sanchez, you're going to want to have that opportunity as well. So it wasn't too shocking to sort of see Sanchez come on and kind of help open things up a little bit. I think that was going to be a natural transgression for the second half. I think you have a player like Morgan who automatically attracts multiple defenders and just opens things up there naturally, only to have a player of Sanchez and her ability to come in and be able to take advantage of maybe some of that extra space that opens up because of Morgan's presence in the box there. But I mean, we saw it immediately, that shot off the post, just sort of letting Colombia know, like, hey, things are going to look different in this second half.
This is entirely true. It changed everything. So we got 2 goals from Sophia Smith and then a goal from Taylor Korniak. She gets her first cap with the U.S. team and her first goal. Lori, you've got a big smile on your face. What is it about Taylor Korniak? Were you expecting this from her? Is this a turn of the page for her in the midfield and for the U.S. if they can establish a little bit of depth with Korniak in that trio?
Oh, well, it's awesome for players, to get this opportunity, your first cap, one of your first touches, you're getting in there and you're getting in the mix. And, I think the fun part about the Taylor Korniak is we've talked also about, her progression, right? Coming from Orlando, what that looked like and how they utilized her, how she's found a home in San Diego, and been able to utilize her strengths that are outside of just her ability in the air. And that's been a lot of the talking point, is like her ability to be able to play a final pass combined with Alex Morgan. And then, the afterthought is kind of like, yes, and also she's good in the air, right? And then we see that her score off of a header. I mean, it's awesome. You saw the celebration. I think the interesting thing in coupling Ashley Sanchez into this is that, to me, there is a variety of midfielders that have been called in that look very different, right? Herrera to Mewis to Andy Sullivan to Sanchez to Korniak to Roosevelt. They all have different qualities, which I think are important going into a tournament like qualifying, because then you see how Sanchez comes off the bench, right? And gives the team a different spark. She's quick in little areas, can play the final pass, can also shoot from distance, right? So, and then you have Taylor Korniak, some different capabilities on the ball, but a threat in the air as well on set pieces that gives the U.S. a different look. So to your point about Korniak, yeah, it's awesome. I think she gives them a different wrinkle for sure. And but I think all of these players do. And it kind of goes back to the overarching theme, in my opinion, is there does seem to be a good balance. And it's just about getting the pieces right and exactly getting the connectivity of exactly what Vlatko wants and what does that look like, right? And, Sandra had spoke earlier, too, about the width. Yes, this team was pretty narrow in this game. So who's responsible for providing the width when you do have 3 narrow forwards, right? That would probably be the outside backs, in my opinion. So just getting those little details correct so that the fluidity and the talent of these players is coming out on a more consistent basis to be able to play at a higher tempo and start to kind of pull teams apart in a quicker way, right? Earlier on in the game.
Well, we get another game, another friendly between the U.S. and Colombia to assess this, see where changes can be made, maybe different players starting. We're going to talk all about it after this very quick break.
The most iconic reality stars from around the world are coming together for the first ever All-Star Shore.
Oh, gee, it's here, bitches!
It's the ultimate party. Competition.
What? At stake is $150,000 cash prize.
Oh, I didn't know it's a prize money. Who will have what it takes to smush?
I should have known he was a player.
The competition.
It's gonna be carnage.
It is getting real.
Yeah, lovely.
All-Star Shore. New series now streaming exclusively on Paramount+.
Welcome back to the USWNT Hour Show. I'm your host, Lisa Roman, alongside Lori Lindsey, Danielle Slaton, and Sandra Herrera. We are talking about the U.S. versus Colombia, everything that happened in that match. Before we get into the look ahead to Tuesday's match, I want to remind everyone I have a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. All you got to do is like this video, drop your social media handle in the chat, and you'll be entered for a chance to win. Look out for a DM from us for your chance to watch all of the CONCACAF W Championship and NWSL matches on Paramount Plus. We have another match, another friendly for the U.S. before they head off to Monterrey, Mexico to play in the CONCACAF W Championship for World Cup qualifiers. We're hoping to see a little bit of rotation, perhaps, in this starting lineup. Danielle, when you looked at the first 11 that were put out by Vlatko and Danovsky, you saw how the player rotation came in with Hatch getting the start, Morgan coming in at half, Sanchez coming in at half, Mewis and Korniak also being rotated in there. When you look ahead and preview Tuesday's friendly against Colombia, what player rotation do you foresee happening specifically in that starting 11?
Goodness. I think you'll see Nair in goal. I think I would like to see Sofia Huerta get the starting nod. I actually liked her better off the bench in the last match, just because she did provide more of that width. Kelly O'Hara tends to drift a little bit inside, and she plays a little bit more centrally, kind of in that half space, I guess you would call it. And I think Huerta, I mean, you've seen this in the NWSL, her service is so deadly and just on point. And so I'd like to see her. I think it's going to be interesting along the back line. I mean, I think you need to get Naomi Girma some minutes and some experience. I think it's going to be a super interesting battle for the center back position, which, by the way, except for Becky Sauerbrunn, did they all play at Stanford? Because I think they did. Right? Davidson, Alana Cook, Naomi Girma, so.
Well, Becky was at UVA. I just want to point that out. So.
Yes. I'm not, no disrespect to UVA. Loving your alma mater over there, Lori. But I don't know. I mean, I'll be interested to see over the course of the year who rises to the top, particularly between Alana Cook and Naomi Girma. I'm curious there. I thought Emily Fox had a great match. I think getting her some minutes, I think she could really be that left back, depending on, what Crystal Dunn looks like going forward, and what her return to play looks like. I think Ashley Sanchez deserves the start, but I also think too, you're going to see the 3 who didn't dress, at least be on the bench. So Sam Coffey, Carson Pickett, Jalen Howell maybe get some minutes in this one. I would say, I don't think you bring them, because if you don't play them now, they're not going to be on the roster for qualifying. So I think you'll see them not necessarily start, but get some minutes. I think you'll see Alex Morgan start, like you all alluded to. I mean, I think part of the reason Ashley Sanchez and Rose Lavelle had more time and space was because of Alex Morgan and her really threatening in behind in a way that Ashley Hatch didn't. And then I don't know. I mean, I think you rest Lindsey Horan. I think her knee to me looks, I don't know, but it just looks like she's not herself. And so really being thoughtful about her progression and her load is going to be important. And then out wide, I mean, I think you see potentially a Midge Purse. You see some variety out there because, I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches when you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's like I've said before, Dee, that like, you know, gone are the days where, you know, everyone's like super scared of the U.S. just stepping out onto the field because players are playing more often. They're playing against competition. But then I also prefaced it with, but then if you're showing up with those strikers, then actually you are scared because I'd be running around behind the goal if that was me.
Totally. I mean, and I have to say, like, there is some urgency for these younger players to play well because look who's not here. I mean, like the competition over the course of the next year, like you get Julie Ertz back, Crystal Dunn, Tobin Heath, Kristen Fuss, Abby Dahlkemper. I mean, Tierna Davidson. Like you can have
Williams
a whole starting
Williams in there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So there is urgency to prove your value right now because when the competition gets deeper and when some of these players are coming back from pregnancy or injury, like it's just going to be a whole nother wave of pressure. And making this roster was a challenge in 2019 and 2020, and it's only gotten tougher now.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you know, I'm with you. I mean, Sandra and I were very similar to when we were predicting kind of or hoping to see certain players. And I definitely like to see Naomi Girma as well. Huerta and what she can bring. Spot on about, you know, being able to provide that width, especially on that side when right side with Sophia Smith, who we will see cut in, maybe start wide, but then have the ability to roam and pinch in. So, I'll be curious about that. And then, you know, I'll be interested to see too, because with Christy Mewis coming off the bench and playing in the 6, do they start her and then play around a little bit with what that looks like of Andy holding, but maybe Mewis dropping in a little bit and helping set play. And it's at times looks like 2 holding mids, but also having the ability to go forward, because those are the things like, I think with this team and the talent that, and without having a Julie Ertz, who has been the out and out, like, you know, ball winner type midfielder, then how do you adjust and get the best out of your players, but work within the principles that Blacko's looking for? But players might not be that true holding mid outside of an Andy Sullivan, right? So then you have to utilize other people's positioning to build out. So I'll be curious about that. And then Alex Morgan as well. I mean, that's who I think they'll go with. Mal Pugh and Sophia Smith, rightfully so, continue to get them minutes and start to build some of that, again, just the consistency in that front line, but also partnerships, right? On not only vertically, but across that front line as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be player rotation for sure, but I think it's going to be amongst, you know, the familiar faces that we saw, you know, the 18 more or less that we kind of saw get minutes, whether it was starting or off the bench. Called 26 players in for these friendlies, but you know, you had Pickett who didn't dress, Howell didn't dress, Coffee didn't dress. And I would imagine that's going to be the same scenario in Utah. I mean, you're going to see this coaching staff sort of utilize the 23 players who are going to be going to Monterrey. So we're probably going to see even a more narrower lens in terms of, like I said, the 11 to 18 that were sort of utilized in between the 6 subs and such. So, you know, I'm a little curious if they're going to give Hatch another start. They're going to Utah. Sometimes we see the hometown crowd play a factor in these things. I'm not on the coaching staff, but I'm not starting Hatch if this is the final game going into qualifiers. I've really liked what Hatch has brought to this team off of the bench. Quite frankly, I think she's been able to come in and sort of show that she can shake things up and sort of be this extra targeted option. But there was a little bit, we saw this a little bit of a disconnect. The timing was a little bit off during that first 55 minutes of of the game for US against Colombia. So and we naturally saw things open up a little bit different with Sanchez and Morgan coming into play. So there's going to be some type of rotation. It's just going to depend on the coaching staff and what they do. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be somewhere amongst that same 17 players more or less that we saw in that first game against Colombia. But I'm with you. I want to see Girma get minutes. If this is the player, that you're calling in for qualifiers in light of missing a Dahlkemper, missing a Tierna Davidson, she's got to see some minutes before being sort of thrown into the mix of things in the tournament, a tournament in which I'm sure this national team is going to expect to see something similar. They're going to expect to see some low blocks. They're going to expect to see some teams that want to clog up, lanes in the middle. So I would like to see Girma get some minutes as well. That she's like the one player that maybe we didn't get a chance to see in that first game against Colombia, and I want to see more extended minutes from Huerta in place of O'Hara, just to see her utilize those white spaces like I mentioned earlier. So not going to be surprised if it's something along the kind of those 18 that we're seeing. It's just a matter of what Flacco's got in his pocket and how he wants to roll out with it.
I agree, Sandra. Sorry, Danielle, I don't think we're going to see Sam Coffey, Jalen Howe, or Carson Pickett get minutes. I just don't. I think
I would love it though.
I would love it.
I remember when they got the call up, I was like, yes, this is awesome.
I just don't think, knowing that the qualifiers are around the corner and that's what they're preparing for, right? Like, these are World Cup qualifiers, and knowing that those three aren't going to make it to Mexico, that they're there for the training camp and that type of purpose. We just like to go at you here, Danielle. Welcome.
Hey, we'll see. I appreciate it. Like, I appreciate it. We'll see how it goes, and we'll see who's right come Tuesday.
We will see.
Hopefully you just manifested it though.
I hope so.
I would love to see it.
And when we look at the six, right, it was Andy Sullivan, and then to see Christy Mewis get that spot instead of someone like Jalen Howe, who you think would be the natural fall in for that defensive six, or even a Sam Coffey, right? But to see Christy Mewis there was a bit surprising, but I think she did do well. And no, she wasn't tested defensively that much, but as her position and to kind of own that spot as someone who is for sure going to Monterrey, Mexico for the qualifiers, the fact that she got minutes there over the two other players that already play that position in the league, that was a little bit telling to me as to kind of what Flacco is looking at and trying to find those player rotations. When Colombia looks back at their first match, no doubt are they looking at that first 45, 55 minutes to say, what did we do well? What do we need to bring to this next match against the United States in Utah? Danielle, when you look at from the United States perspective, the spaces in that first half, where they were, where they weren't, how does the United States watch that first 45 minutes, and what did they take from that to grow into the second match?
I mean, I guess I think we kind of saw that in the second half, right? Like they found a way to be more creative in the midfield. And honestly, I think, to me, one of the biggest differences there was they were pressing the restraining line, so there was a little more space for Rose Lavelle and Ashley Sanchez to play. But then also, too, like, if you watch Ashley Sanchez's movement and creativity as compared to Lindsey Horan kept drifting out wide, right? She tends to do that. She was the one who is early on, like, recreating that width. I don't want my number 10 or number 8 or whatever the heck number we're going to give her. I don't want her, my attacking center mid, to be trying to play make from out there. That was one of the things that I thought was a big difference in the second half. So I'm looking for more of that. And just quite frankly, I'm looking for more sharpness, more cohesiveness, more chemistry in general. The challenge when you're looking at a tournament is you want to be playing your best football at the end of the tournament. So what is it, July 18th or whatever the heck the final is? You tack these two games so onto the front of it. So it's how can you progress over the course of these 7 games? How can you get the experience? Yes, if you're Vlatko Andonovski, you have to say, I'm taking this tournament seriously. It's one game at a time. But, like, let's be honest, 4 teams qualify for sure out of CONCACAF. I mean, it would be an upset of the proportions of Miracle on Ice if the United States did not get out of their group, right? So to me, it is still about learning. It's still about like testing things out. And that's the challenge when you're a national team coach. You don't have the luxury. It's going to continue to get this way more and more on the women's side as these FIFA windows get tighter, as we see more of our U.S. players playing internationally, not getting released during these windows and such. Like, you don't have the luxury of, oh, we'll come into camp, we'll do a residency, we'll all get on the same team. Like, you have to use every single training and opportunity to be assessing your players. And so that's why I get the feeling that there is going to be a little bit more rotation, and that it's going to be important for them to keep progressing, keep layering in those tactics, keep finding a way to better execute in how to break down defensive that are playing so compactly, because that's the challenge we have seen. It's not rocket science how to beat a bunker or how to break down a low block. There's like a half a dozen ways that you do it, maybe 10 if you're stretching it a little bit, but it really is about executing it. And the US didn't execute it to the extent it needed to in the first half. It got a little better in the second half, but it's got to get way better over the course of this 7-game series, if you will.
Because the competition is so tight, specifically in the front line and that forward group, Lori, you mentioned you wanted to see Sophia Smith, Mallory Pugh have big games, and you also think that they're going to start again. What did those two in particular, Pugh and Smith, need to do to get to the next level in this next friendly?
Oh, well, I think they are at the next level. I'm not looking for them to have like these huge games. I just think it comes down to what Danielle said, which is execution. I mean, we could have seen Malpugh on the board early on in the first 12 minutes, just didn't put that one away, sliced through it. We could have, there's a number of opportunities. It really is about precision. I think there's some patience that come along with that, right? And that has historically been a bit of a topic at hand for the U.S. when teams are compact centrally, make it difficult to play through. It's not as a transitional style of play. Historically, that's been difficult for the U.S. because we want to go, right? We want to press. We want to condense the space. And that ultimately, though, when you do have the ball, limits the space that you have to be able to move it around, right? And then a Colombia team that had a game plan, put numbers in the box with 5. So to me, there's about patience. It is about execution and precision, and then some fluidity. Because I do like the point that Danielle made, and I actually have Germany on my mind because I have them in the Euros and I've been watching, and they actually have center mids that float out wide as well. But when they do that, then they have positional, like different fluidity. They have an outside back that comes in, or their number 9 will drop in, right? There's a real fluidity to the way they play. So if Haran's going to do that, and that goes back to my overarching theme always about like, what are the principles at hand? Who do you have on the field? And knowing what each other's tendencies are. Because if Haran's out there, then you have to have somebody filling in the gap, right? Is that Malpugh? Is that Emily Fox on that side? And so it doesn't become stagnant. And, that might look a little different on the right-hand side, depending on who's playing. But all of that comes down to why I actually don't think there'll be as many changes as we think. And also, I think when you look historically back at Vlatko, when we think there's going to be changes, there actually hasn't either. And I think because he does want to start to build that connectivity, right? I think he does have an understanding of who he wants to start, very similar to what we saw the other night. And given that these players have a lot more minutes, that's going to continue to be a theme going forward. Now that these players are playing a lot more games, a lot more soccer in a calendar year, you're naturally going to have to adjust and swap players out. But I think that there's going to be somewhat of a consistent lineup to start to build that, because to Danielle's point, and something that we've been saying on the show all along, gone are the days where you have 3 months to prepare, especially the U.S. Players are going to be coming in for these FIFA dates. The same thing that we see on the men's side with their young team. How do you get everybody on the same page, operating and being efficient? And the final third is always that last piece, right? So, and especially with a team like the U.S. who want to attack and are passionate about it too. Sometimes it'll be like, slow down a little bit, get some other players involved, look for the combinations, right?
So, Lori, what are your predictions then when you look at this game, whether it's in terms of goal scorers, penalty kicks? You think they're going to get another penalty kick call? Will they put it away? I mean, do you think the U.S. is going to win? And then if so, like, who are going to be the top 2 players that are true game changers in this match?
Well, yeah, I do think the U.S. can. I think that is the heart and soul of this team is showing up and saying we are going to win every game. That is the expectation.
Mhm.
That is what the players know about, and it's also about evolving, right? Because this new generation and having the balance with some of the veteran players is what it's all about. But listen, I think two of the most exciting players in the NWSL on this team, Mal Pugh and Sophia Smith. I'll look for them. To continue to be kind of those go-to players. I think they welcome that in some of the interviews that we've heard too, which is awesome. You'd love that. And then, but like, honestly, I don't know if I could just pick out a couple players. I think this is more so going into this and to our entire point as well is that, listen, this is a deep roster.
Yeah.
Danielle mentioned all the other players. There's potential that, the men just got announced for 26 for this World Cup. That could be the potential for next year as well. So on the women's side, so there's a lot of factors. So to me, it's about, more, not so much about individual performance. It's just about more of the team, because if you're getting on the same page, these players, their individual brilliance is going to start to shine. It's going to come out in the system. So to me, it's just about setting everybody up, getting everybody and getting the right mix. Quite frankly, I think that is interesting. Sometimes we want to go with the same group, but I think, it's not always about just going with the best 11. It's like who's operating, who gets it, who can connect the dots really. So at least that's how I see it. Right. So.
Yeah. You mentioned the men's World Cup and getting to 26. It's a whole can of worms. We can't get there yet, Lori, because Dunn could be back next year from her pregnancy. She's already
She's back.
Literally already back.
First.
It's so impressive to see. So we can't even begin to open that can of worms. But Sandra, when you look ahead to Tuesday's match for the U.S., are you still looking for your center backs to come and shine through, or what specifically are you looking to see any changes from the U.S. side?
Yeah, I want to see it at the outside back position. I think we're gonna see it. We talked about Kelly O'Hara getting that first start and then coming out in the second half and the team getting some different looks with Huerta in her place. And there is immediate availability happening today for the U.S. Women's National Team with Vlatko Andonovski. And apparently, breaking news, he's just alluded that Kelly O'Hara will not be starting tomorrow or available for the team, and as well as Andy Sullivan. So I think we're going to get our wish, y'all. We're going to maybe get to see a little, maybe that means a little bit more Christy Mewis in the six. We'll see. And I think we're all pretty excited to see Sofia Huerta probably get some extended minutes as well and see what she can do. So we already sort of have a confirmation right there that we're going to see some different things and different looks in the back line there. But it makes me a little curious now if that's an automatic rotation right there. Does that mean he's going to continue some rotation across that back four? Are we going to see my assumption is that, will we ever see Emily Sane get minutes in either of these games before the CONCACAF championship? Honestly, I'm not too sure. And quite frankly, I don't think if you've got Emily Fox putting together the minutes that she's putting up against this team and looking in form ahead of the qualifiers, I don't think you mess with that, quite frankly. I think if you continue to sort of see the progression from Sofia Huerta on the opposite side of that, you run with Fox and you run with Huerta. So I would like to see it. So I'm not too sure what that means for the center back pairing, like what we saw out of Sauerbrunn and Cook. So I'm not too sure what that would mean for somebody like Girma, but I'm hopeful that maybe she gets at least 45 in this one.
Danielle, what do you think now that we know that Kelly O'Hara is for sure out, Andy Sullivan out? That means Huerta most likely, but in that sixth role, who would you like to see?
I still think there's going to be rotation. Like, put Jalen Howell in there. Like, so
you would rather see Howell.
You guys can buy me a beer if I'm right. I'll buy you a beer if you're right. And
I'm all for either. I see both sides really. Like I agree. I can see the consistency, but I'm also like, get Sam Coffey in there.
Yeah,
she's been excellent. Like she's been excellent for Portland. So I'm like,
yeah, I'm
all for the bold changes too. So
yeah, I mean, and to be honest, like, I guess to me, my question, and Laura, you're, all of you guys are in the NWSL, like in the weeds more than I am, just watching as a fan. But like, who gives you more on the attacking side of the ball from that number 6 role? Because, and again, no disrespect to Colombia, but you expect the United States to have more of the ball. You don't expect them to have a huge attacking presence over the course of 90 minutes. And so to me, like, I'm leaning towards the attacking side being my priority, as opposed to really evaluating my center backs or my goalkeeper during a match like this. So who do you think will give more offensively from the defensive center mid role?
I mean, I have my thoughts. Do you want to go, Sandra?
No, you can go, Laura.
Okay. I mean, listen, I have said it from the beginning. I would go with Sam Coffey. I think that she offers something that we haven't seen in a bit, in terms of just this, like, you know, she could switch to play. She had Penn State. She was more of an advanced midfielder, so already has that attacking quality, I think, innately, but has been such an important piece to the way that Portland plays. You know, and not an out and out straight up ball winner, but like positionally, I think is fantastic, especially for a young player, putting herself, screening balls, cutting off passes, but then just the simplicity and her ability to keep the ball moving, connect passes. And Danielle, like you said earlier about like just the execution and precision in the final third, you know, we didn't see Andy on the ball, and watching her enough with Washington and how important, as I mentioned earlier, she is just organizationally. I believe that Andy can do this too, but with her out, to me, Sam Coffey is the one that's going to offer that the most in terms of like, let's connect this first pass when it turns over. That calms the team down. Then you start to see other players being like, all right, to the correct foot, into the space, to their feet, right? So that's who I would go for. And I'd also like just to see her at this level with the jump that she's made. I mean, she played every single minute for Portland so far.
Yeah.
I think it's her and actually that might be it. I think there is one other player for Portland, but let's not get into the weeds about the stats of NWSL here. But I'm a fan of hers. I think she offers something different. And it goes into the depth conversation that we've had here about that 6 going forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, you know, with the news that it's O'Hara's out and Sullivan is out, I think that's going to maybe open up some things. So I don't think Danielle's going to have to buy anybody a beer. I think when these 2 players out, I mean, that's an opportunity, right, for someone else.
So I'm already buying Danielle a beer because
I'm sorry. I'm here to say that you're already
He already said one of the players not going to Mexico will start tomorrow, but he doesn't say who. So Danielle, Venmo coming your way for a beer because this is fantastic. I'm excited to see it. I think it could be a Coffey or a Hal in that rotational 6 role. As much as I would love to see Carson Pickett, the depth at 6 isn't there, and that's where he needs to get players minutes. I am so here for this. We love being wrong. Well, I love being wrong on attacking third. It's so fun to come back and talk about all of this. This was fantastic. Our hour is entirely up. We have another match tomorrow for the U.S. against Colombia, a friendly that they will be playing in Utah. Before we go, final thoughts from the 3 of you. Lori, I'm going to start with you. Final thoughts on all of this, the last match, the match coming up, anything you just want to hang out with Danielle about?
Oh, yeah, indeed. Come on the show all the time, please. We love you here. And I'm happy to give my money away to very much to you 3. If we're wrong, I'll send you all the beer money. And mainly, I'm just looking forward to this team because this is one of the, obviously, we've just seen one game with a little bit of the mix of some of the veterans with the youth and how it all comes to play. And, you know, always love the tournament. So I'm excited about CONCACAF starting and the qualifiers.
Sandra, final thoughts from you?
Come on, no one's gonna put a scoreline on it.
Oh, I'll do predictions. Yeah, totally.
You always leave that up to the writer. Give me a scoreline.
Goodness gracious, I'm gonna go with 3-0 again.
Okay, I think that's fair. Listen, when I did my written preview of this first match, I went 4-0.
Okay.
They could have been 5-0, but the penalties just were not as crisp as they should have been. But I think maybe they look a little different and a little sharper in the second game. So I'm excited to see the rotation. I'm excited to see one of the either some type of combination of Howell and or Coffey potentially in this role tomorrow for the team. And I think that might actually give some new looks for them as well. So I think that maybe that one might lead the way for some goals, and hopefully they happen in the first half as well, not just the second half. So I don't know. I'm gonna be ambitious. I'm gonna say 5. I'm gonna put a 5 on it.
All right. I think that's I'm not hating on that. I do think the score could be more lopsided. This is a team. I mean, in soccer, you don't often get the chance to play home and homes, or you don't play teams twice in a row very often. And I think this team is smart in its execution. It learns from its mistakes. It learns when it doesn't do things well. And we saw that in the second half compared to the first half. I think that momentum will continue. And I'm just eager to see better execution on the attacking side. And to me, to keep learning about how Vlatko is going to start to put his team together and what that starts to look like. I don't necessarily look at the results being so incredibly important in this one, but I'm looking for my better understanding of tactics and better understanding of who can execute what Vlatko is trying to get this team to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about the learning curve. Danielle, can you give us a score line?
I like 4-0. What did you say, Laura? You cut out.
I said 3-0 again.
Okay, 4. Then I'll take different.
I like that. 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I like the 5 just because I don't want to pick what someone else does. I'm going to go 7. US. I think they're just going to ball out on goals.
Okay, Lisa.
I'm here for it. I'm here for sending all the beer money everyone else's way. Don't worry about it. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Danielle, Lori, Sandra, thank you for being here. Everyone who listened in, thank you so much. If you like this video and you dropped your social media handle in the chat, look out for a DM from us. You could be our Paramount Plus subscription winner. You can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third for more. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube to catch our interviews and get alerts for when we go live, youtube.com/Attacking Third. We'll be back next Monday for another USWNT hour. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for being here.